When you think about countries with pyramids, you think of Egypt, you think of China, you think of Bosnia even, Central America, and numerous other places around the world. One place you don't think of is my homeland, Ireland. You don't think in terms of this place having a pyramid, or any kind of pyramidic structures from ancient times or even from modern. Though Ireland is very well known for large amounts of ancient megalithic structures, which are, many of them are far older than even dynastic Egypt, we don't have a reputation for having pyramids. Well, guess what? That's all changing now. Before I go into the pyramid, I want to talk about the landscape the pyramid is located within. It's in an area of County Mayo called the Neale. Now, this is a very strange and unusual area for two reasons. One, it's absolutely filled with ancient megaliths, and also, why does anybody not know about this? It's a very strange place. It's almost like a deliverance type mentality. It's like they have all these things in it, but the locals don't particularly go on and share it or anything like this, and this only adds to the mystery of this pyramid, and in particular the Neale estate. Now, the Neale estate is an ancestral homeland belonging to Anglo-Irish aristocrats who we can say for certain built follies. Now, a folly, if you don't know, is basically, it's nearly always a tribute to an ancient monument, and that has, according to the dictionary, no specific purpose. But if you've seen my Sintra Code documentary, you will know that follies do actually serve a purpose. They invoke and they hold the land sacred for the pagan gods until they return. In the case of Sintra, it's the old classical gods, as well as some of the European Celtic gods. Now, the same thing happened in the Neale and in other places where you had these aristocrats who built these follies among their ancient lands and groves. They were almost acting as repositories or storehouses for the ancient pagan gods during the time of Christianity. And indeed, at the Neale, you can see a Greek temple called the Temple of the Four Winds, and this remarkable and very strange structure called the Gods of the Neale, which has a frieze on one side which depicts an angel, a griffin and a unicorn, and a very strange inscription dedicated to all the gods, classical in nature. In the village itself, the grave of Lulan Fada, one of the alleged sites of the Battle of Mytura, is buried in someone's backyard. So imagine that, having a god buried in your backyard. But yeah, that's the Neale. And how come this is not really well known around Ireland? That's the standing stone in this person's yard is the burial place of the god Lu, who's a famous not only Irish Celtic god but European wide Celtic god. Lusitania in Portugal is named after him, as is London in England. Again, this is only adds to the strangeness of this place, the Neale. Also within the Neale as well, there is a veneration of the goddess Diana, which is also very common if you saw the Sintra Code documentary, and also a veneration of Apollo. Now, if you saw my other documentary on Occult Dublin, I'll put the links to both those documentaries at the end of this video. You will see that Dublin was venerated to the god Apollo, and this is why you have a cranium cult all over the city in the guise of bull's heads on large buildings that are venerated to the god Apollo by the city's Freemasons. Now, this brings us to the pyramid. The pyramid at the Neale officially is listed as a folly and was built allegedly in the mid-1700s. However, there's something not right here. Why would the aristocratic family build numerous follies around their now ruined home in a certain period which we can validate in the mid-1800s, 100 years after allegedly starting the first one, which was this pyramid? I'm not convinced that that pyramid is a folly for several reasons. One, it's the pyramids you see in the Azores. It was also heavily rebuilt and remodified, cleaned up in 1990, so it looks quite pristine. But prior to that, in its dilapidated form, it looked very ancient indeed. Now, there's another mystery here. The oldest Ordnance Survey map of the Neale comes from 1830s, and it does indeed show where the pyramid is, a square thing called a monument. But often these monuments, whatever details are present in them, is often shown on these maps. So if it's a circular fort or a ring fort structure or a circular enclosure, it will show that. It does not show the pyramid in the Neale as a stepped pyramid. It just basically shows it as a monument. Now I'm going to speculate here that that pyramid is actually not a folly, and it's actually quite ancient. Who built it, I don't know. We do have, of course, stories in the Irish mythologies of the Parthenons who came here from ancient Greece. Now that brings up another interesting story regarding the American writer H.P. Lovecraft. In his story The Moon Bog, spoke about an Irish American who came back to a place called Kildare and started to drain the bogs, and out of the bogs, along with the ancient Irish megaliths, also came the ancient Greek, classical Greek structures. And that's the Neale. It could almost in some way be a shamanic representation of Lovecraft's story. And this brings us to another thing that's quite sinister, along with the fact that I had mentioned that this is a unique landscape filled with megaliths and fairy forts and wells and sacred druidic wells and so on. One thing that is very disturbing is that in at least the case of the Temple of the Four Winds, we can prove beyond doubt that that was built on top of a megalithic temple going back to Neolithic times, something that would be considered a great taboo in Ireland. We saw that in my other video on the Hellfire Club in Dublin. It's something you don't do in Ireland, and yet this aristocratic family in the Neale did this. Ironically, this aristocratic family no longer exists, and their house is in ruins, in a very strange ruins that has all weird trees growing inside it. But all over the grounds there's other remains of other follies and other buildings that have been destroyed by the sands of time, as has the family that built them has been destroyed by the sands of time. So the pyramid itself is a stepped pyramid, and it's completely out of place with the other follies. It's not of a classical Greco-Roman design. It's quite different, and this is what makes me suspicious about both its antiquity and its backstory. There would be, I'm going to throw it out there and say, until actual evidence comes forward of the commissioning construction of this pyramid, I'm going to suggest that it is an ancient pyramid, possibly built by the same builders who built the pyramids in the Azores. Now that's another interesting link there as well, when we talk about the Atlantean idea and so on. And finally, the desecration of the ancient monuments by the aristocratic family didn't appear to take place with this pyramid. It seems to have been built on its own outcropping of stone, where it sat alone. An interesting outcropping, and that's always an interesting thing itself, why a specific outcropping. You'll see in the photographs I show the outcropping the pyramid is built on quite clearly. So there you have it. Ireland has a pyramid, not like this one, a stepped pyramid. And this country is just full of surprises, and they are surprises that never stop coming. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this video.